When my manager laughed in front of the entire office after I asked for a $5,000 raise, I thought the humiliation would be the worst moment of my career. I had no idea that within weeks, the same decision would help unravel a $14 million client relationship and expose a leadership failure no one could ignore. I had never believed that asking for a fair salary was something to be ashamed of. For 3 years, I had been the person everyone quietly depended on. If a client called 5 minutes before a presentation, I answered. If a teammate got sick, I stayed late without complaining. If a project was falling apart, somehow it always landed on my desk. I wasn't the loudest person in the office, and I never tried to be. I simply believed that if I worked hard enough, people would eventually notice. The office itself always looked impressive from the outside. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the skyline like polished mirrors. The lobby smelled faintly of fresh coffee and expensive wood, and every visitor was greeted with confident smiles. But behind those glass walls, pressure lingered in the air like a storm that never completely disappeared. One Monday morning, I walked in carrying coffee for a coworker who had forgotten breakfast. She smiled. "You always remember everyone." I laughed softly. "I just don't like seeing people start the day hungry." She shook her head. "One day, someone's going to appreciate you the way you deserve." I smiled, but something inside me whispered that she might be wrong. That afternoon, I finally gathered the courage to schedule a meeting with my manager. It wasn't an emotional decision. I had prepared everything: performance reports, revenue numbers, client satisfaction scores, emails from executives thanking me for rescuing difficult accounts. Most importantly, I was the key account manager responsible for the company's largest partnership, a client whose contract was worth nearly $14 million over several years. I knew every detail of their business, every executive by name, every deadline, every expectation. I wasn't asking for something unreasonable. A $5,000 raise reflected the value I had already been creating. I knocked on the office door. "Come in." The manager didn't even look up from the laptop. "What is it?" I placed the folder neatly on the desk. "I'd like to discuss my compensation." That finally got attention. The laptop closed. "Oh?" "I've taken on additional responsibilities over the last 3 years. I've consistently exceeded my targets, and I've managed our largest client account successfully. Based on my performance, I'd like to request a $5,000 salary increase." For a second, the room was perfectly quiet. Then the manager leaned back and laughed. Not a polite chuckle, a loud laugh, the kind meant to make someone feel small. "5,000? Another laugh. "You actually think you're worth that?" My cheeks warmed, but I kept my voice calm. "I believe my results support the request." The manager opened the folder for barely 2 seconds before pushing it aside. "Results?" The word dripped with sarcasm. Anyone could answer emails and smile during meetings. "I do much more than that." "No," the manager interrupted. "You think you're more important than you really are." Before I could answer, the office door opened. 2 department supervisors stepped inside. The manager didn't lower the voice. Perfect timing. My stomach tightened. "You two should hear this." The supervisors exchanged uncomfortable glances. "This is hilarious," the manager continued. "She wants a $5,000 raise." One supervisor looked at me with visible sympathy. The other stared at the floor. No one laughed. Only the manager did. "So," the manager said loudly, Tell them why you deserve executive money. I swallowed the embarrassment. I've consistently exceeded every performance target. The manager rolled both eyes dramatically. Oh, here come the speeches. I've retained our largest client. That's the team's work. I coordinated every renewal. The company coordinated it. I solved every escalation. You answered emails. Every sentence I spoke was dismissed before it could breathe. The room suddenly felt much smaller. I could hear keyboards outside, phones ringing, someone walking past the glass office without realizing my career was being reduced to a joke only a few feet away. Finally, I closed the folder. I understand. The manager smirked. Good. No raise? No raise. I nodded once. Thank you for your time. As I reached the door, another comment followed me. And next time, bring realistic expectations. The laughter echoed behind me. Outside, the office became strangely quiet. Several coworkers looked up. Nobody asked what happened. They didn't need to. My expression had already answered the question. A coworker slowly walked over. I'm sorry. I smiled gently. It's okay. No, she whispered. It wasn't. I thanked her and returned to my desk. My inbox was already filling with messages from the company's biggest client. Questions, approvals, meeting requests. The same responsibilities that apparently anyone could do. I answered every email carefully, professionally. No anger, no revenge. Because the client deserved my best, regardless of how I had just been treated. Late that evening, the office had almost emptied. The city lights shimmered beyond the windows like scattered stars across dark water. The silence felt heavier than usual, broken only by the soft hum of computers left running overnight. I looked once more at the rejected salary proposal before placing it back into my bag. For the first time in years, I wasn't questioning my value. I was questioning whether I still belonged in a place where respect seemed more expensive than a $5,000 raise. And as I turned off my monitor, I couldn't shake the feeling that today's laughter had started something far bigger than anyone in that office realized. You won't want to miss what happens next. The next morning, I arrived earlier than usual. The office was almost silent. The lights above the empty workstations glowed softly, and the cleaning crew had just finished polishing the glass walls. For a few peaceful minutes, it felt like a completely different place, one where nobody judged anyone, and nobody laughed at another person's ambitions. I unlocked my laptop and found an email waiting from our largest client. Looking forward to today's strategy review. We appreciate everything you've done for our account. I couldn't help smiling. No praise from inside the company had ever meant as much as trust from someone who had actually seen my work. By 8:30, the office came alive. Coffee machines hissed, phones started ringing. Someone rushed past carrying a stack of folders. A junior analyst hurried toward my desk. Could you look at this before the meeting? I'm afraid I missed something. Of course. Within 2 minutes, we had fixed the presentation. Thank you, he said with obvious relief. You just saved me. It's going to be your presentation, I replied with a smile. I'm just helping. He walked away looking far more confident than when he'd arrived. Across the room, my manager had noticed. I caught that brief glance. Cold, calculating. The kind that made you wonder why helping people could somehow make someone else uncomfortable. A few minutes later, a company-wide meeting began. Everyone gathered around the conference table while others joined remotely on the large screen. The manager walked in carrying no notes at all. Confidence practically filled the room before a single word was spoken. We have one priority, the manager announced, keeping our biggest client happy. Several coworkers exchanged quick looks. They all knew who handled that account every day. The manager continued as if that detail didn't exist. I've spent months building this relationship. I lowered my eyes to my notebook. There was no point correcting the story. Not here, not now. The meeting moved on until one executive asked a simple question. Who will be leading today's client presentation? Before I could answer, the manager spoke. I will. Silence. Then another executive frowned. I thought the key account manager usually handled those meetings. I'll take over today. The answer came too quickly, too confidently. Something about it didn't feel right. After the meeting, one coworker quietly caught up with me near the coffee machine. Can I ask you something? Sure. Are you okay? I smiled. I will be. She hesitated. I've worked here 6 years. So? I've never seen someone treated the way you were yesterday. I looked down at my coffee cup. I don't want anyone choosing sides. I'm not choosing sides, she paused. I'm choosing fairness. Before I could answer, my phone vibrated. The client. I answered immediately. Good morning. Their warm voice filled the line. We're excited for today's review. So am I. Will you still be joining us? I hesitated for only a heartbeat. My manager will be leading today's meeting. A short silence followed. Oh. Just one word, but it carried unmistakable surprise. I see. We'll make sure everything is covered. I'm sure you'll do your best, the client replied politely. Then came another pause. Would you still be available afterward if we had questions? Absolutely. Thank you. When the call ended, an uneasy feeling settled in my stomach. For 3 years, they had never asked that question. Never. As people headed toward the main conference room, I stayed at my desk, exactly as instructed. Through the glass wall, I could see the presentation begin. The manager stood confidently at the front. Slides changed, people nodded. Everything looked perfectly under control. Until it didn't. One slide remained on the screen longer than expected. The manager stopped speaking. A client representative asked something. I couldn't hear the words. The manager answered. Another question followed. This time, 2 executives on the client side looked at each other instead of taking notes. The atmosphere shifted. It was subtle, but unmistakable. A few coworkers noticed it too. One whispered, "Something's off." Another slowly stopped typing and stared through the glass. 10 minutes later, the conference room door opened. The manager stepped outside. The confident smile was gone. A forced one had taken its place. Walking quickly toward my desk, the manager lowered their voice. I need the latest implementation file. It's already in the shared folder. No, the updated version. I sent it yesterday. I can't find it. I opened my laptop. It's here. 3 clicks, less than 5 seconds, the file appeared. The manager grabbed the laptop without so much as a thank you. Fine, then hurried back into the meeting. The coworkers nearby had seen everything. No one said a word, but the silence spoke louder than sympathy. 20 minutes later, another message appeared on my screen from the client. When you have a moment, "Could we speak privately today?" I read it twice. No explanation, no details, just one quiet request. Something had happened inside that room. Something important. And for the first time since yesterday's humiliation, I had the unmistakable feeling that the story was no longer about a denied $5,000 raise. It was becoming about decisions that could cost far, far more. You won't believe what the client wanted to discuss next. If you've ever been underestimated at work, I'd love to hear your story. And if you're enjoying this journey, don't forget to subscribe, because sometimes the quietest people leave the biggest impact. I stared at the client's message for several seconds before replying. "Of course, just let me know what time works for you." The response came almost immediately. 15 minutes, just you. My heartbeat quickened. They had never asked to meet without my manager before, not once in 3 years. I grabbed my notebook and headed toward one of the smaller conference rooms. Frosted glass covered the lower half of the walls, giving the room a sense of privacy without completely shutting out the busy office beyond. Through the clear strip across the top, I could still see coworkers walking past, carrying laptops and coffee cups, as if it were just another ordinary day. It didn't feel ordinary anymore. The video call connected. 3 familiar faces appeared on the screen. They smiled when they saw me. "Thank you for joining us," one of them said. "Of course. Is everything all right?" For a brief moment, nobody answered. Finally, the senior executive leaned forward. "We'd actually like to ask you that." I blinked. "I'm sorry?" "You've been our primary contact for years. You're usually the first person to notice when something isn't right." I hesitated. "I always try to solve problems before they become visible." "We know." There was genuine warmth in that reply. It was the kind of respect that couldn't be faked. Another executive folded his hands. "Today's meeting felt different." I chose my words carefully. "My manager wanted to lead today's presentation." We noticed. A quiet silence settled over the call. Then came the question I hadn't expected. "Was that your decision?" "No." The executive nodded slowly, as though the answer confirmed something he had already suspected. We asked several technical questions. I figured. There were no answers. I looked down for a moment. I prepared documentation for every topic. "We know." That surprised me. One of them smiled gently. "You've always come prepared." Another added, "That's why we're confused." The words landed harder than any accusation. They weren't angry. They were disappointed. And disappointment from a trusted client was far more dangerous than frustration. The senior executive took a slow breath. "We've invested a great deal in this partnership." "I understand." "We're not looking for someone to blame." "I'm glad." "We're looking for someone we can rely on." For a second, the room felt completely still. Even outside the glass walls, the office noise seemed to disappear. Then the executive asked quietly, "Can we ask you something personally?" "Of course." "Are you still managing our account?" I paused. "I don't know." The answer hung in the air. I wasn't invited to today's meeting. The executives exchanged glances. No one spoke for several seconds. Finally, one of them sighed. That explains a lot. The call ended on a polite note, but the atmosphere had changed. Before disconnecting, the senior executive said one final sentence. "We hope the company realizes what it has before it's too late." I walked out of the conference room with my notebook still closed. Across the office, I saw my manager laughing with two directors near the windows, confidently retelling the meeting as though everything had gone perfectly. The smile faded the moment our eyes met. "Where were you?" the manager asked. "In a client follow-up." "Without telling me?" They requested the conversation. The manager's expression hardened. "What did they say?" "They had a few questions." "What questions?" "About the project." The manager stepped closer. "If they contact you again, you inform me first." "I always follow company policy." "I'm serious." "So am I." For the first time since the salary meeting, I didn't lower my eyes. I wasn't being defiant, I was simply telling the truth. That seemed to irritate the manager even more. "Don't forget who you report to." "I haven't." A tense silence stretched between us. Several coworkers pretended to focus on their screens, but no one was actually working. Reflections in the glass walls made it impossible to hide their curiosity. The manager finally walked away without another word. A few minutes later, my inbox chimed again. This time, the sender wasn't the client. It was the company's internal audit department. The subject line was short: "Request for project documentation." I read it twice. No explanation. No context. Just a request for every document, email trail, meeting summary, and account record connected to the company's largest client. I quietly opened the shared folders. Everything was already organized. Every decision, every approval, every revision, every timestamp. I had kept careful records simply because I believed good work deserved good documentation. At that moment, I realized those ordinary habits might become far more important than I had ever imagined. Someone inside the company had started asking questions, and this time the answers wouldn't depend on opinions. They would depend on evidence. You won't want to miss what the audit uncovers next. By Friday morning, the office felt nothing like it had just a week earlier. Nobody laughed near the coffee station. Nobody gathered around the glass conference rooms to chat before meetings. The only sounds were keyboards, ringing phones, and quiet conversations that stopped the moment someone from the executive floor walked by. The tension had become impossible to ignore. Just after 9, I received a calendar invitation. Executive conference room. No subject, no explanation. When I stepped inside, several senior executives were already seated around the table. Representatives from internal audit sat along one side. My manager was there too. For the first time since I had joined the company, the confidence was gone. The manager didn't even look at me. One executive broke the silence. "Thank you for coming." I nodded. "We've completed our review of the documentation surrounding our largest client." Nobody spoke. The executive continued. "We compared project records, meeting notes, email history, presentation files, and client correspondence." A folder was opened. "There are significant inconsistencies." My manager leaned forward immediately. "With all due respect, the account became unstable because communication inside the team broke down." The room remained silent. The executive looked toward me. "Did you withhold information from your manager?" "No." "Did you refuse to support the client meeting?" "No." "Did you provide the requested files?" "Yes." The executive nodded toward the auditors. One of them clicked a remote. The screen behind us lit up. A timeline appeared. Every document, every revision, every email, each one stamped with the exact date and time. The auditor spoke calmly. The documentation shows the requested presentation was completed before the meeting. Another click. The implementation files were shared before the presentation. Another. The client questions had already been answered in previous documentation. Silence. My manager cleared a throat. There must be some misunderstanding. The auditor didn't react. We also reviewed email traffic. Another slide appeared. Several executives quietly read the screen. One message stood out. I've prepared detailed answers for every anticipated client question. It had been sent the afternoon before the meeting. Attached were all the files my manager later claimed were missing. The timestamp couldn't be disputed. The room grew even quieter. My manager shifted uncomfortably. I must have overlooked that email. Nobody answered. Then another executive spoke. The client contacted us directly yesterday. Everyone looked up. They expressed confidence in one employee. The executive turned toward me. They specifically requested that you resume responsibility for their account. For a second, I forgot to breathe. They also informed us that future contract discussions would remain on hold until that transition is complete. The number everyone had been avoiding finally entered the conversation. Our partnership is valued at approximately $14 million. The words landed like a weight across the room. No one needed to explain what that meant. One poor leadership decision had placed one of the company's most valuable relationships at risk. The executive folded both hands. This was never about one difficult meeting. The voice remained calm. It was about repeated failures in leadership, accountability, and communication. Nobody interrupted. The evidence spoke louder than anyone could. My manager finally looked at me. Not with anger, not even with resentment, only disbelief, as though the carefully built image of control had disappeared in front of everyone. The head of internal audit closed the final folder. Our findings have been submitted to the board. The room stayed silent. The company will proceed with disciplinary action consistent with corporate policy. No dramatic announcement, no shouting, no public humiliation, just quiet consequences. After the meeting, people slowly returned to their desks. The atmosphere felt strangely lighter. Several coworkers smiled as I walked past. One of them quietly whispered, "I knew the truth would come out." I smiled back. So did I. An hour later, the client called. "Good afternoon." "Good afternoon," I replied. "We've spoken with your executive team." "I understand." "We appreciate the way you handled all of this." "Thank you." "We'd like you to lead our account again." "I'd be honored." "And because trust matters to us," the executive paused, "we're moving forward with the partnership." I closed my eyes for a brief second, not out of relief, out of gratitude. The contract wasn't lost. The relationship had been saved. That afternoon, the division president stopped by my desk. "Do you have a moment?" Inside the office, the conversation was brief. "I owe you an apology." "You don't have to." "I do." The president smiled. "We failed to recognize the person who was quietly holding everything together." There was a short pause. "We'd like you to continue leading the account." "I'd be happy to." "And we'd also like to approve the salary adjustment you requested." I couldn't help smiling. The extra $5,000 no longer felt like the victory. Being respected did. As I packed my bag that evening, sunlight poured through the glass walls, filling the office with a warm golden glow. Only a few days earlier, I had walked out of that same building, wondering whether I belonged there at all. Now I knew the answer. I had never needed to prove my worth. I only needed the truth to catch up with it. My manager laughed when I asked for a $5,000 raise. In the end, it wasn't my request that almost cost the company $14 million. It was the decision to underestimate the person who had been protecting that relationship all along.